Alright, this lesson comes from section 2.9 on solving linear inequalities. Before we talk about the solving of the inequalities, we need to talk about interval notation, which is a way of writing an inequality solution that some of you may not yet be familiar with. So let's look first of all. Suppose we had x is greater than or equal to 4. I'm sorry, that's not greater than or equal to, it's just greater than. X is greater than 4. Then on a number line, you would mark 4 and you would shade to the right because it's greater than. And since it does not have the equal to, you would use a parenthesis. And the last number that's shaded, it goes forever, so the last number is infinity, which is that, looks like a sideways 8. So, you know, you've seen this kind of notation, and you've seen this. What you might not have seen is this, which is called interval notation. And it's just a third way of writing the very same thing. What this says is start at 4 and go to infinity. The parenthesis tells me that the 4 is not included, and you always use a parenthesis with infinity. Alright, so for my next example, I have x is less than -3. So I started at -3 and I shaded left because it was less than. Because it didn't have the equal to, I used a parenthesis. And when you write an interval notation, you go left to right as it appears on the number line. And the order does matter. It's got to go left to right. Well, the last number, it goes forever, so we call that negative infinity up to -3. So I've got negative infinity, comma, -3. That's the way you write that in interval. We're going to always use a parenthesis with infinity. And then because the -3 is not included, I'll use a parenthesis there as well. My next example is x is greater than or equal to 10. Hold on, let me shift my paper. Okay. So greater than 10 means 10 to the right. So I marked 10 and I shaded to the right. And because it does have the equal to, I did a bracket there. So when it's got the equal to, we're going to use a bracket. When it does not, we're going to use a parenthesis. So again, you go left to right. So it's 10 to infinity. This is positive infinity, but you don't have to put the positive sign. Because the 10 was included with the equal sign, I use a bracket, and we always use a parenthesis with infinity. And then my last example, I have x is less than or equal to 6. So I marked 6, and I shaded to the left. It did have the equal to, so I used the bracket. And again, when I write it in interval, I go left to right. So that's negative infinity to 6 with the bracket. Now, in terms of solving inequalities, this is the important piece that you need to know. If you multiply or divide by a negative number, you have to change the direction of the inequality sign. Other than that one piece, solving an inequality is exactly like solving an equation. So let's look at this example. I've got -3x is greater than 12. Well, to solve that, I have to divide both sides by -3. So because I'm dividing by a negative, I change it from a greater than equal to a less than equal to. Okay, if you divide by a negative, you switch the direction of the sign. Now look at this example. 3x is greater than or equal to -12. What I'm dividing by is the 3. It does not matter that this is negative. it's controlled by what's connected to the x, the number I'm dividing by. And here I'm dividing by positive 3, so the direction of my inequality sign does not change. Okay, so now we're going to look at some problems in the book, and we're going to start on page 192. 192. You can't see that. Sorry. I need to get my camera better. Let me work on that. Okay. So we're on page 192. And I'm looking at problem number 5. And you see it drawn there. And so it says, write the inequality using the variable x that corresponds to this. So that graph in number 5 starts at -4, and it goes to the right, so that's greater than, and it has a parenthesis on it, so I don't put the equal sign. I just do x is greater than -4. Now let's look at number 7. That one starts at 4, positive 4. But it's shaded to the left, so that means less than, and notice that it has the bracket on 4, so that means I need to include the less than or equal to. Alright, now moving to number 9, and they give me one part, and they want me to write the other 2. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a number line. I'll mark 4. It's less than, so I'll shade to the left. It has the equal to, so I'll use a bracket. Now when I write interval, as I was telling you, you go left to right. So if it's shaded all the way to the left, we call that negative infinity. So we've got negative infinity, comma, and then the furthest to the right is 4. You always use a parenthesis with infinity, and because of the equal to, you use the bracket on the 4. Alright, number 11. They give us x is less than -3. So I draw my number line, I mark -3. It's less than, so I shade left, and it doesn't have the equal to, so I use the parenthesis, left to right. So negative infinity to -3, always a parenthesis on infinity, and because it didn't have the equal to, I use a parenthesis there as well. Now, look at number 15. It has -1/2 is less than or equal to x. I'm going to suggest to you that you rewrite that so that the variable is on the left-hand side. I think you will find it easier to do if you do that. Notice that the arrow was pointing to the -1/2. So when I rewrite it, I need to make sure it's still pointing to the -1/2. It's like you flip the whole thing. So now I'm going to draw my number line. I'm going to mark -1/2. It's greater than, so I'll shade right. It does have the equal to, so I'll use a bracket. So left to right is bracket -1/2 infinity parentheses. Okay. So now we're going to get into actually solving some of these inequalities. So we're going to look first of all at number 21. It has z minus 8 is greater than or equal to -7. We use the same exact steps that we did when we were solving equations. So we're going to add 8 to both sides. You never change the direction of the inequality when you're adding or subtracting. So that'll be greater than or equal to, and that's going to be 1. And it says in the directions to solve it, graph it, and do interval. So after I've solved it, I need to draw the graph. Here's 1. It's greater than, so shade right. It has the equal to, use a bracket. Left to right, bracket 1, infinity, parenthesis. All right, let's go to number 23. Okay, let's see, can you see that? Hold on, let me fold my paper so you can see it better. All right, that'll work. So 2k plus 3 is greater than or equal to k plus 8. So just like when we were solving equations, we want to get all our variables on the same side. So I'm going to subtract the k, copy the 3, copy the greater than or equal to. That's going to zero out, and I have 8. Then I'm going to subtract 3. And I'm through because there's no coefficient with k that I have to divide by. So I've solved it. Now I graph it. Mark a 5. Shade to the right. It has equal to. Use a bracket. Left to right. 5 to infinity. Okay. Now we're going to move across the page to page 193. And we're looking at problem number 31. And it has 3x is less than 18. So I need to divide by 3, but what I'm dividing by is a positive number. So it does not change the direction of the inequality. So I've solved it. Now I need to graph it. Mark 6. Less than means shade left. Doesn't have the equal to means use a parenthesis. So negative infinity to 6. Always use a parenthesis with infinity. And the 6 has a parenthesis as well. Now I'm going to number 35. Negative 8t is greater than 24. So what I need to do is to divide both sides by negative 8. Because I'm dividing by a negative number, instead of a greater than, it's going to become a less than. When you divide by a negative number, you must reverse the inequality sign. So I've solved it. Now I graph it. Here's negative 3. It's less than, so I shade left. It doesn't have the equal to, so I use parenthesis. Negative infinity to negative 3. Always use a parenthesis with infinity, and the negative 3 had a parenthesis as well. Okay, now we're going down to number 37. Negative x is greater than or equal to 0. Well, this is just like equations. We can't leave a negative sign with the variable. So however you want to look at it, take the opposite of both sides, multiply both sides by -1, divide both sides by -1, any of those phraseologies will work. But the point is that you're dealing with the negative. So instead of a greater than equal to, it's going to become a less than equal to. But whether you multiply by -1 or taking the opposite or whatever, 0 is still 0. So I've solved it. Now I'm going to graph it. So I choose 0. I shade left because it's less than. It's got the equal to, so I use a bracket. And remember, you go left to right. The order does matter. So that's going to be negative infinity to 0, parenthesis, bracket. All right, let's move down to number 43. Whoops, same problem. You can't see it again. Hold on. There we go. All right, so just like solving an equation, I need to subtract 9. So I get 8x less than or equal to -24. Remember, adding and subtracting will never change the inequality sign. It's only when you multiply or divide by a negative number. Now I need to divide, but notice that what I'm dividing by is +8. The fact that I'm dividing into a negative is irrelevant. It's just the fact that I'm dividing by 8. So the sign is going to stay the same, and I get -3. So I've solved it. Now I graph it. Here's -3. Shade to the left because it's less than. Use a bracket because it has the equal to. So left to right, negative infinity, -3, bracket. All right, let's move down to number 47. I'm sorry, 45. I didn't mean to skip that one. Let's go to 45. So we have -4x minus 3 is less than 1. Just like with solving equations, I need to add 3. Now I need to divide by -4. And when I divide by -4, I get those numbers. And because I divided by a negative, instead of less than, I'm going to do greater than. You flip the inequality when you multiply or divide by a negative number. So I've solved it. Now I graph it. Parenthesis, -1 to infinity. There's that one. Okay, so let's move down to number 53. And just like when we were solving equations, you want to do cleanup work first. So I can combine this 6x and this x. And I can combine this 2 and this 4. Now I'm going to subtract 4x to get my variables on the same side. So I get 3x plus 3 is less than 6. One more reminder, you never change the direction of the inequality when you're adding or subtracting. Now I'm going to subtract 3. Now I'm going to divide by +3. So I've solved it. I'm going to graph it. Here's 1. It's less than, shade left. needs a parenthesis because it doesn't have equal to with it. Left to right is negative infinity to 1. Both of them have parentheses. Alright, that should be enough for you to be able to do the exercises in this section now.